Bum-ba-da-dum! Howdy, welcome to BanjoBenClark.com. I'm Banjo Ben, your host here on the site. Teach you how to play guitar and mandolin, but this week is Banjo Week. Now, if you followed along on my beginner learning track, which I hope that you have, you've been introduced to something called chokes, which is where we begin to bend the banjo string all over the banjo neck, even up here. And then we've also been introduced to endings, where we get our standard banjo sounding ending, something like this. But now it's time for us to move up the neck and tackle what's often referred to as the shave and a haircut lick. And it kind of makes sense when you say the words along with the lick. Shave and a haircut, 2 bits. So we're going to talk all about that lick, and maybe it's one that you already play, but here's what I've determined. I've determined that a lot of folks don't use correct technique when they're playing this lick, and then I've also determined that it's easy to get in a rut and kind of use that same little lick over and over and over again. So what I want to do today is talk about technique and theory behind this lick, and then look at all kinds of different variations like you just heard, so that you can introduce those into your playing and not always have the same old ending to the song. If you're watching here on the website as a Banjo Ben Clark Gold Pick member, then you've got everything you need here on this page. Just scroll down for the tabs and the rest of the video lesson. If you're watching from somewhere else, come on over. Check out those learning tracks. I take you step by step through learning how to play the banjo, and I make it fun for you. Let's jump in. Now, because I've already covered chokes and began to talk about endings in the beginner banjo learning track, we won't rehash that here just for the sake of time, but if you've never dove into these subjects and you want to go check that out. So today we're moving on to what's called the shave and a haircut lick. And this is a very, very common way to end our bluegrass songs. There's lots of different ways to end it, but this is one of the most common. And it's also one of the most maybe difficult to get your fingers around at first. I know it can be frustrating for folks that are learning how to play the banjo because it is quite a stretch. And oftentimes whenever I look at people trying to play this lick, I see why. It was because there's some pretty bad fret hand techniques. So I just want to talk about that briefly, and we'll talk about what the lick is regarding theory, and then we'll begin to talk about variations. But this lick is based out of what we'd call the E minor position. It's a 3-finger chord. We're going to place our middle finger on the 9th fret of the 3rd string. Not that string, the 3rd string, I said. Then our index finger is going on the 8th fret of the next string. And then our ring finger is going on the 9th fret. So we got 9, 8, 9. If you can just find that for me and play those 3 strings together, that's an E minor chord. We get E minor chords all over the neck, right? But this is one of them that we get. And that's the basic position that we're going to get there. Now I'm going to talk about an alternate way to play this that makes it a little easier and that I use often. So hang on for that. But I want to go ahead and address the elephant in the room, because this is something that a lot of beginner and even intermediate students run from, this particular position. Now, getting that position itself is not that hard. What becomes more difficult is when we have to also choke that 11th fret of the 2nd string. So when we're getting this lick, let's go ahead and throw up the tab there. What you'll see is, for a very common way to play this lick, is we start out with a pinch with the 1st and 2nd strings along with a choke. So we have the 11th fret being choked on the 2nd string, and then the 9th fret being played on the 1st string. And when we get that with this position, it looks like this. Now, I have to admit, I've been playing banjo for quite a while. That's still a bit uncomfortable for me to get. Part of the reason is I was born with fingers that don't straighten out all the way. That's as straight as they go. So I must say that even if you're having a difficult time, maybe you think you're older, oh, I'll never learn this. Yes, you can. I even have a physical inability, and I'm able to get it just with work and with good technique. Now, one of the main reasons why people can't really get that 11th fret is because of the angle of their hand here. So what I usually see is people trying to cradle the banjo neck in their palm, at which point it's impossible for us to move our pinky laterally in that direction. Or maybe they've got too much angle where their fingers are pointing perpendicular or parallel with the ground, and then they can't get their pinky out there because their pinky is simply not long enough to stretch all the way to the 11th fret. So what we need to do is split those two positions. We don't need to have our fingers pointing directly to the right. We don't need to have our fingers pointing directly toward the ceiling. We need to let the banjo neck rest on the first digit there, first knuckle of our index finger, and my fingernails are pointed toward my right shoulder. So I've got some space underneath my hand here, and my fingernails are pointed toward my right shoulder. It's kind of a 45-degree angle, and that allows me to not have to go too far laterally and not have to go too far lengthwise to reach that 11th fret. And then what's the next step beyond that, besides finding the 11th fret, is to be able to develop the strength in our pinky to choke it a little bit. And to choke that string and that string only, and not move our whole hand up. We're not trying to choke all three strings. We don't want that. So a good way to practice is you can even release the other two fingers, hold down the 9th fret with your ring finger, and then with your pinky, just practice choking that string up to almost meeting the pitch of the first string. Maybe play them together and listen to that. Now, the important thing, we covered this in the chokes lesson, is not to choke it before you play it. You don't want to play it already choked. It doesn't do any good. It doesn't get that effect we're looking for. You want to play it before it's choked and then choke. And that's pretty difficult. And a lot of times we want to do that too fast and we don't get good technique there. So slow it down. Make sure that you're getting the choke after you play the string. And if you get it just right, you can hear that clash of these two notes that are only a half step apart being played and then getting closer and closer together with that choke. So it begins to relieve some of the tension that we have in that interval. Now, I don't think that I ever choke it all the way up to match the pitch to where it's like this. That would be what I'd call a bend. A choke is kind of an attempt at a bend, according to my definition. Okay, so we've got that basic choke there. And let's think about what's going on here with the theory. This 11th fret is the flat third, so it's got this little bluesy feel, and it's bending up to a major third, so it's got a minor to a major type of movement. And then as we see there in our tab, the 8th fret is our root. Okay, so that's the note that we're, of the key that we're playing in. So if you want to do this lick over a G chord, if you're playing a song in the key of G, we've got our 8th fret down there with our index finger, measure 1. That's a G note. Now, why was that helpful to know? Because you're not always going to be playing the key of G. Okay, you're going to be moving this around. Whether you capo or not, sometimes I play in other keys without using a capo, and I need a good ending lick. So if I wanted to play this in A, guess what I would do? I would make sure that my index finger is on an A note, which is the 10th fret. So then you do everything the same, except just base it out of the 10th fret instead of the 8th. And we all of a sudden get an A lick. Or maybe even more often, I'm playing out of the key of F without a capo. So I can move my index finger down to an F note, which is the 6th fret, play the same lick. And now we have an F lick. Okay, it transfers even more into that, but now we've got a grip on the theory. I want to talk about all kinds of different variations because there's all kinds of timing variations. There's different position variations. Maybe you're having just a really, really hard time with this position and you want to look for a better way. I'm about to show you that. And then I want to give you the tools that you need to create even your own shave and a haircut licks. If you're watching somewhere else besides banjobenclark.com, come on over to the website, join as a GoPick member. We have lots of fun there. If you're here on the site already, just click on the next video segment. We'll get going.